The fortress world of Valendris Prime housed one of the Celestian Empire's most critical defensive installations, a massive military complex protecting core territories from the hostile void reaches beyond. Empress Seraphina Voidwhisper, who had ruled for over 8 centuries through tactical brilliance and overwhelming military superiority, was present observing joint training exercises when the crisis began. The Celestian military valued disciplined formations, coordinated tactics, and fighting as part of something greater than individual glory. Their warrior culture had refined tactical doctrine over millennia, creating forces that operated with machine-like precision. Humans were recent additions to Celestian-controlled space, a young species whose military capabilities the Celestians viewed with mixture of curiosity and condescension. Human technology was adequate but unremarkable, human soldiers competent, but lacking centuries of refined doctrine. Among the human contingent was Lieutenant Commander Jason Drake, a special forces operator whose expertise involved hostile environment reconnaissance and asymmetric combat tactics. He was part of a small advisory team, theoretically providing alternative perspectives but mostly filling ceremonial alliance obligations. The crisis began when a Void Wyrm breached the fortress perimeter, a massive predatory creature so dangerous that even Celestian military doctrine categorized them as extreme threat. Avoid engagement unless absolutely necessary. Nearly indestructible through conventional weapons, possessing both physical and psionic capabilities that made them devastating opponents. The creature crashed through outer defenses and began moving toward the fortress's civilian research quarter, where hundreds of non-combatants, including Celestian scientists and their families, were sheltering in facilities never designed to withstand such assault. Celestian Military Command evacuated their personnel from the creature's projected path, establishing defensive perimeter around critical military installations, while abandoning the research quarter as strategically expendable. Jason Drake was in the research quarter when the evacuation order came through, helping with routine security inspections. He saw the civilian panic, heard the Celestian military withdrawal, and made a calculation that went against every tactical doctrine he'd ever learned. He stayed, not because he had a plan to defeat the Void Wyrm. Even he knew that was probably impossible with just personal weapons and no support, but because the corridor between the creature and civilian shelters was a natural chokepoint, and someone holding that position might buy time for more complete evacuation. He didn't consult with command, didn't request backup he knew wouldn't come, just positioned himself in the chokepoint corridor with whatever weapons and equipment he could scavenge. When the Void Wyrm entered the research quarter, smashing through walls like paper, Jason opened fire. The creature noticed him immediately, this small, fragile thing attacking something that outmassed him by orders of magnitude. Empress Seraphina, watching through security feeds in the command center, saw what was happening and made an extraordinary decision. She ordered all Celestian forces to stand down and observe rather than attempting intervention. Her generals were confused. Surely they should either commit forces to support the human or complete the evacuation withdrawal. Instead, Seraphina wanted to see what this human did when facing impossible odds with no support, no hope of victory, and every rational reason to flee. What followed was not heroic battle in any traditional sense. It was desperate, improvised, brutal survival against a creature that should kill Jason in seconds. But he used every advantage the environment provided. The chokepoint corridor limited the worm's ability to leverage its size. Structural supports could be collapsed to create temporary obstacles. Environmental systems could be overloaded to create explosions or toxic atmosphere. Jason didn't try to kill the worm. He tried to slow it, to hurt it enough that it focused on him rather than bypassing toward easier prey, to buy time measured in minutes that felt like hours. He adapted constantly. When plasma weapons proved ineffective, he switched to kinetic impacts and environmental hazards. When the worm learned to anticipate his tactics, he changed approach, using unpredictability as defense against a creature with psionic prediction capabilities. He took injuries that would kill most beings, kept fighting through pain that should incapacitate him, refused to retreat even when every injury screamed that he should. In the command center, Celestian military officers watched with growing disbelief. This human was employing tactics they would never consider: reckless use of environmental destruction, complete disregard for equipment preservation, acceptance of injuries that would make Celestian warriors withdraw to preserve combat effectiveness. Their doctrine said a warrior should preserve themselves for battles they can win. Jason was spending everything on a battle he clearly could not win. But Empress Seraphina saw something different. She recognized that Jason wasn't fighting to win. He was fighting to buy time, to protect, to refuse the strategic calculation that says some casualties are acceptable. His tactics weren't reckless. They were optimized for a completely different objective than Celestian doctrine would prioritize. He wasn't trying to preserve himself or achieve military victory. He was trying to shield civilians behind him for as long as his body continued functioning, and he was succeeding far longer than anyone thought possible. The fight stretched across 40 minutes, an eternity against a Void Wyrm. Jason was shattered, bleeding from multiple serious wounds, weapons exhausted, fighting with debris and bare hands when nothing else remained. Finally, with civilian evacuation complete, bought by time Jason's desperate stand provided, Empress Seraphina ordered military intervention. Celestian heavy assault forces engaged the worm with coordinated tactics and overwhelming firepower, driving it back beyond the fortress perimeter. Jason collapsed the moment he saw friendly forces arrive, his body finally giving up once adrenaline and sheer will no longer needed to keep it functional. Empress Seraphina descended to the research quarter personally, standing over Jason's broken form as Celestian medics worked to stabilize him. She addressed her assembled military command with words that would echo through the empire. "I ordered you to watch rather than intervene, because I wanted you to witness something our civilization has forgotten in our millennia of refined tactics. This human fought alone, with no support, no hope of victory, against a threat our doctrine says to avoid. He fought not for glory or tactical advantage, but to protect those who could not protect themselves." She looked at her generals, her voice carrying absolute conviction. He adapted constantly, refused to retreat, spent his body like ammunition because the objective, saving civilian lives, mattered more than his own survival. That is not recklessness. That is a kind of courage our empire has trained out of our warriors in favor of collective discipline. When Jason regained consciousness days later in imperial medical facilities, Empress Seraphina visited personally. "You fought alone while my army watched, and you taught us something we desperately needed to learn. My people have become so focused on collective tactics that we have forgotten what individual courage looks like, what one person willing to sacrifice everything can achieve." Jason, still recovering, managed to respond. "I just did what needed doing. Those people needed time to evacuate and I was in position to buy it. Wasn't heroic, wasn't following doctrine, was just the right thing given the circumstances." Seraphina's smile carried admiration. "That is precisely why it mattered. You did not calculate glory or assess tactical value. You identified need and responded with everything you had. You were not trying to achieve military victory. You were trying to protect people, and you succeeded against odds my doctrine would have called impossible." Over the following months, Jason's stand became legendary throughout the Celestian Empire. The Empress ordered changes to military training, incorporating scenarios where individual initiative and desperate courage were valued alongside coordinated tactics. Later, giving a presentation to Celestian Military Academy students, Jason was brutally honest. "I was terrified the entire time. I'm not some perfect warrior who defeated an impossible threat. I'm someone who was in the right position at the right moment and too stubborn to run away when running would have been the smart choice. What I actually demonstrated is that humans are really good at doing stupid things for reasons that don't make tactical sense, but feel right anyway. A student asked, "But you knew you couldn't win." Our doctrine says facing impossible odds without hope of victory is wasteful. Why fight? Jason's response was pure human pragmatism. Because behind me were people who couldn't fight back, and in front of me was something that needed to be slowed down. Winning wasn't the objective. Buying time was the objective, and that seemed achievable if I was willing to pay the price. Your doctrine is probably right that it's wasteful, but sometimes waste is the most valuable thing you can commit to. Empress Seraphina, watching from the back, reflected that this was exactly why she ordered her army to watch. Because her people needed to see that perfection isn't always the answer, that sometimes desperate, costly,